Hello everyone, welcome to our on-demand webcast for the month of January 2011. Today's topic is making room for 2011's new procurement initiatives. My name is Biju Mohan. I'm a Senior Director of Consulting with Globally Procure. I've been with Globally Procure for the past 5 years and I've been working on multiple industries across functions including supply chain, procurement, business strategy, and operations. Before we begin, I would like to just introduce Globally Procure to all of you. Our company was founded in 1999. Over the past 11 years, we have grown to more than 600 highly qualified professionals spread out across multiple regions including the US, Asia where we have offices in India and China, in Europe where we have offices in London and Prague, and also in South America in Brazil. We have worked with more than 120 clients across 20 different industries. Several of them are Fortune 500 companies. Over the past 11 years, we have managed more than $50 billion in spend across 200 categories all over the world. We are a minority and women-owned enterprise, ISO 9001 certified and SAS 70 Type 2 certified. Our technology suite of products includes a fully integrated software as a service based function, which will provide services for all the procure to pay areas. Coming now to the topics that we are going to plan for discussing today in our webinar today. What we're going to talk about is what have been the changes in the expectations from procurement organizations with respect to 2011, especially in context of the recent economic downturn. I'd also like to share with you what are some of the key initiatives that most of the leading organizations are taking up for meeting those increased goals and objectives for 2011. I would like to share with you our ideas and perspectives on how these companies can succeed in these initiatives and what are the critical success factors for all those areas. And finally, we'd like to leave you with our thoughts on how all these initiatives can be rolled up and managed in 2011 very effectively to meet your overall targets. Leading organizations are still reeling under the effects and after effects of the global economic downturn. Companies across industries and regions have sharply cut down spending and are reviewing ways to ease pressure on their margins and sometimes even to continue to stay afloat. As focus on costs and revenues increase, procurement function has found itself to be in the crosshairs of the executive management, as companies realize that this function is in control of a significant component of the cost base in purchased goods and services. As a result, procurement departments almost universally are faced with increasingly challenging annual savings targets. In addition, they are also responsible for ensuring realization of the identified savings of all the past initiatives. Consequently, procurement departments will need to develop a detailed plan for 2011 to meet their challenging targets, as well as put in place mechanisms to monitor the implementation of these initiatives. Leading organizations are using a mix of traditional cost-cutting measures, as well as advanced techniques to meet their goals of higher cost efficiency and cash savings. In this document, or in this webinar, we will detail out some of these advanced approaches as well as the critical success factors for each of them. Traditionally, procurement cost reduction has primarily been achieved by focusing on supply side issues. These would include online negotiations through e-auctions, low-cost country sourcing, global supply rationalization, to just name a few. A notable few organizations have also focused on demand-side reviews, specifications rationalization, consumption management, as well as compliance management. Compliance management includes contract compliance, supplier relationship management, and so on. As you can see in this slide, leading companies are increasingly including advanced techniques into this set of initiatives. The advanced techniques push the envelope for procurement companies by increasing their collaborative role with other entities. The nature of collaboration can range from working with other departments such as IT and marketing in the same company, to collaborating with purchasing departments of companies with similar profile, to the extreme case of collaborating with a completely unknown external entity to drive results through outsourcing of functions. Companies that have leveraged these advanced techniques have achieved an additional 3 to 4% minimum on their own ongoing targets from traditional approaches. Let's come to the compliance management topic first. Organizations are using compliance management to monitor overall service quality and, more importantly, to minimize savings leakage. Procurement function has dedicated teams to measure supplier-side compliance, process-related compliance for internal users, and contract compliance to measure adherence to contractual rates, terms and conditions on both sides. Companies typically have a self-sustaining process where incremental changes to compliance policies and processes are introduced based on the results achieved and feedback received from the internal and external stakeholders. Although some sort of compliance processes is in place for most companies, what sets the leaders apart is the process clarity communicated to internal users as well as suppliers. In addition, leading companies also have explicit support from the top management to enforce these processes at all levels to ensure maximum compliance. As you can see in this slide, the top management support and process clarity are clearly the most effective in driving compliance, as experienced by the leaders. So in short, what are the key success factors for compliance management? 1. Complete support from top management. 2. Total clarity in processes and rules, and consistency in this being applied to all the elements of the supply chain. And finally, and last but not the least, continuous process monitoring to track the overall results, and then escalating any issues to the top management if there are any. Coming now to the second topic, global sourcing. Global category management strategies need to look at the nature of the category itself as well as its criticality to the day-to-day operations. As you can see in the slide, companies need to review all their key spend categories and then determine the appropriate level of control to be exercised on these. Leading companies have developed global strategies for all direct and indirect categories with local and regional overrides as the case may be. Developing a classification-based global strategy has the advantage of leveraging on local and regional resources to manage non-core categories, while at the same time enabling procurement personnel to focus on high-spend, mission-critical categories at a global level. As you can see, traditionally, mostly companies have been focusing on direct materials for developing their global strategies. But increasingly, leading companies are focusing on other areas including capital expenditure, indirect materials and services, and crafting global policies with regional and local overrides. All this translates into greater control across all the spend categories and also gives the local and regional resources enough empowerment to take their own decisions and override any specific category based on local and regional realities. So in short, what are the critical success factors for global sourcing? 1. Do not ignore any subcategory. Look at all the categories in terms of their spend as well as the criticality to day-to-day operations. This includes direct categories, indirect categories, capital expenditure, and services. Once you have identified all the categories and classified them into core, critical, or non-core, the next step is to develop global, regional, or local strategies. At the global level, you would define processes and policies to be followed across all locations. At the regional and local strategies level, you would allow the local and regional resources enough empowerment and enough flexibility to take their own decisions so long as they are adhering to the overall processes and policies. And finally, consistency through global monitoring is as critical as in any other area to make sure that these processes are being adhered to and the results are trickling in. Next, we come to demand management. Traditionally, procurement has been focused on looking at price changes while negotiating with suppliers. However, procurement function now needs to go beyond these very restricted worldview. A comprehensive demand management approach targets minimizing the total cost of ownership by identifying all the drivers of the costs of a particular category. This slide gives an example of the approach that we had used for a leading consumer goods company for managing their logistics costs. We looked at the entire freight costs and looked at all the cost drivers that impact their overall freight costs. As the slide indicates, the freight costs were not only driven by the rates charged by the transporter service providers, but also by as disparate issues such as monthly dispatch planning at the factories, nature of the packaging sizes, specification of the transportation process, as well as inventory planning at the warehouse locations. The insight that we got from this is that just price negotiations with suppliers are not sufficient. Procurement also had other levers with them to manage the overall cost. This included better planning, a relook at the transport specifications through value engineering, a relook at the packaging process to look at the packaging sizes and thereby reduce the overall cost, an entire look at the distribution and the manufacturing network, translating into network optimization opportunities. All these together was implemented along by the procurement function and us, working with the manufacturing teams. Based on the combined inputs from all the team members, we identified several optimizations in temperature specification for frozen truckloads, packaging sizes, as well as the network changes, especially in the warehouse and the distribution center locations. All of these together resulted in additional savings over and above the rate negotiation savings with the transport service providers. As you can see, traditionally, companies have not been effectively using demand management techniques. One of the main reasons for this is the increased collaboration that is required internally among the various user departments. However, as you can see, many of the leading organizations are increasingly focusing on this area after they are realizing that there are many more levers that needs to be addressed to make sure that the overall total cost of ownership for any category is the lowest. This will definitely include rate negotiations with suppliers, but will also start including increased collaboration with the user departments and other functions. Collaboration with internal entities such as user departments and external entities, including suppliers and customers as required, is critical for succeeding in this initiative. For inbound items such as raw material, internal entities typically are the manufacturing departments. Similarly, for outbound or customer-facing items such as packaging materials, advertising services, the internal entities will be sales and marketing function. It is also not uncommon to involve external entities such as suppliers or even customers in certain situations. In order to be successful, such initiatives should be driven in a project-based manner with clear objectives and action points outlined right from the beginning. Here's a brief case study about the work that we had done for a Fortune 500 consumer products goods company. The company was looking at packaging materials critically because of increasing costs as well as regular disruptions in supplies. Apart from high costs, the client also wanted to mitigate the supply risks because of the reliability of the supplier dispatches. We as a team worked with the entire raw material and the packaging material procurement department as well as the production department to look at what are the key root causes for the problems in the supply risks. As part of this, we first identified the critical suppliers of packaging material. These were termed as diamond suppliers. The diamond suppliers were typically suppliers who had a high portion of their spend, which were part of the total cost base for the client. Depending upon their tenure and depending upon the importance of the supplies that the suppliers were making to the client, we also used them to determine the criticality of their supplies. Based on all this, a set of diamond suppliers were identified and contacted for further discussions. A comprehensive joint process improvement team was constituted, which included members of the diamond suppliers, included members of the procurement function, and of course the production department. Together, there were several initiatives that were identified to drive down the overall costs. These included value engineering of the specifications of the packaging material, joint sourcing of the packaging raw materials with the suppliers, thereby enabling the suppliers to leverage on the client's purchasing power. And finally, at a more process-oriented level, there was an integration of the ERP systems of the suppliers and the client, which was done to make sure that any changes in plans in the production side at the client would be communicated immediately to the supplier, and any changes in the supplier's production plan would be communicated immediately to the client. All this resulted in several advantages. First of all, the opportunities that were identified resulted in price and the cost reduction by almost 15%. Secondly, because of the increased coordination between the supplier and the customer, the on-time in full measure of the supplier dispatches to the client location increased to more than 75% within 6 months of implementation. This is further expected to grow to 95% by the end of this year. Procurement function in leading organizations are actively seeking opportunities to support other functions in sourcing their products and services. Traditionally, sourcing of services in functions such as IT and marketing have been managed internally by these functions. Similarly, selection of service partners in strategic areas such as professional services, logistics, etc. are managed typically by the top management directly. However, the result of such a process has been inconsistency in policies, terms and conditions, and any pricing terms with the suppliers. Also, in many cases, money has been left on the table as these departments do not want to jeopardize their relationships through intense negotiations. This is where procurement has been stepping in to play a positive role. First, they are able to introduce uniformity in all negotiated terms and conditions between such services and aligning them with all the other purchased products and services. Secondly, procurement can play an impartial role and bring unbiased negotiations process to the table. This will ensure that ongoing relationships of the user departments with the suppliers are not affected, but at the same time, the negotiated values are optimal. It also brings focus on procurement's key strengths of negotiations to the forefront in such non-traditional areas. So, the user department can continue to play their role in the finalization of the specifications or requirement setting and setting the service level expectations, while the procurement function can be involved in setting the price benchmarks and determining the final prices as well as the pricing terms and conditions. And clearly the leading companies are way ahead of the other companies in involving procurement in the non-traditional areas. Collaborative sourcing across companies, sometimes even competitors, is not a new approach. However, in the past, this approach had failed because of conflicts of interest, fear of openness, as well as regulatory limitations in some cases. However, the new approach being pioneered at many leading organizations has been designed to address some of these issues. Companies now collaborate in areas that are either non-strategic or non-core. This may include indirect categories such as office supplies, or even more complex categories such as MRO or even capital projects in some cases. In certain examples, companies are collaborating with competitors in areas where their strategic objectives are not conflicting. As an example, Unilever and Nestle jointly negotiate their logistics requirements in Latin America with transport service providers. In certain situations, they also use each other's distribution networks for managing their monthly shipments. It should be noted that companies are still in the learning mode with regard to this approach. Leaders have achieved mixed level of success through this route, but they are hopeful of this becoming a critical avenue for generating cost efficiencies as they progress into the year. We, Globally Procure, are working with some of the leading consumer goods companies to achieve this for 2011. Finally, we come to the hot topic of the year, procurement outsourcing. Over the past few years, more and more companies have jumped into the outsourcing bandwagon. They have been looking at outsourcing in multiple areas, including strategic, tactical, and most commonly in the operational areas. Often, this move has been met with mixed results. The main motivation for outsourcing has primarily been cost reduction, although increasingly, companies are using this to achieve more strategic results. Leading companies have achieved success in this area by monitoring and managing their outcomes in a planned manner. The first step towards success is to identify and plan for target outcomes. The planned objectives are critical in order to select the right partner. If the objective is to reduce the overall cost of managing the function, then cost of the outsourced service becomes an important criteria in partner selection. Similarly, if the objective is to gain access to skills and technology of an external partner, then credentials and thought leadership of the potential partners becomes more critical. Once the objectives are clear, the next step is partner selection. In addition to the ability of the partner to meet the outsourcing goals, leading companies also evaluate potential partners in terms of their fit with the company culture and philosophy. As an ongoing step, companies along with their outsourcing partner establish a monitoring framework to measure and track the progress of the initiative on a regular basis. This, supported by executive support and clarity in communication throughout the company, is critical for the success of the outsourcing initiative. I'd like to share a small case study of the work that we had done in the procurement outsourcing space for a US Fortune 300 company. The company was facing several issues. First of all, internally, the procurement team used to work in separate silos where there was no internal communication and very definitely very low level of coordination across departments. Because of the unfocused performance and the silo-like structure, there was no clear service level targets. As a result of it, more than 30% of the POs were still open after 90 days. 24% of supplier deliveries were greater than 30 days late, and more than 70% of blocked invoices were cleared only 7 days or even longer sometimes. In addition, the processes were not very structured, and procurement wages were also high as compared to the market rates. All this translated into high level of inefficiency at the procurement department, and the client wanted to do something about it. The globally procured team took over the full responsibility of the procurement function for the client. And the first phase, we started a 6-week transition phase. The objective was to look at an improved service level performance, reduced cost of transaction, and finally increased sourcing savings by being more focused on final savings targets. As a result of this, globally procured put in place a team of highly skilled professionals with a mix of category expertise and transaction expertise. The next step, the team set up detailed operating performance processes. They defined key performance indicators and key service level agreements for each activity to be performed in the procurement function. And finally, a continuous process improvement measure was put in place to make sure that any learnings or any changes in the processes that are going forward learned can be incorporated back into the day-to-day activities. The results were dramatic. There was improved performance across all categories due to the increased credentials and the expertise of the new team members. Similarly, on a transactional level, the service levels increased dramatically. Only less than 10% of the POs were open after 90 days. Also, more than 90% of the invoices started getting cleared within 7 days. Similarly, there was significant improvement in the supply deliveries because of constant focus and increased measure of the OTIFs for the procurement department. In addition to all this, there was increased process efficiencies because of the use of technology tools which were implemented by globally procured at the client site. Overall, the transaction outsourcing process resulted in significant transaction cost reduction for the client. It also resulted in process improvement and significant sourcing savings because of the category expertise that the new team were able to bring in. So in summary, all the initiatives that we had discussed here have their own recipes for success. But a common theme that comes across all of them is the planning and monitoring process. Mind you, just planning these initiatives, although necessary, is not sufficient for success. As with any journey, it requires careful monitoring every bit of the way. This is essential to keep track of any slippages as well as to ensure that we are achieving what we set out to do. Program management is a good way to ensure that the department resources are sticking to the plan. In today's volatile environment, only nimble companies that program manage these initiatives will see their targets being met and exceeded. With this, we come to the end of the webcast. I would like to thank all of you again for joining me in this webcast. If you have any questions, please direct them to the addresses mentioned in this slide. You can also mention your query and press the submit query button below the screen, and those will get directed to us. Also, all the registered viewers will get a free copy of the white paper, Making Room for 2011's New Procurement Initiatives. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.